Track 4. Good times. The outskirts of the city is a world of its own. Pockets and clusters of crumbling buildings. Residences and homes that have fallen into disarray with time. Away from the buzzing activity of the city's core. Quieter, but by no means silent. Less crowded, but by no means abandoned. Those who were run out of the city proper. Those who couldn't afford it. Those who sought the peace of a remote location but still craved the safety of being near a city. Those who sought refuge, either from the wastes or the city itself. The city dwellers see it as living in squalor. As a lesser means of living. More dangerous. Filthy. Those who are addicted to the rush of city life and hypnotized by the neon lights, high on the fumes and accustomed to the haze of pollution obscuring their faults. Keith, however, finds something peaceful about the slums. It's populated, but the people are shyer, warier, stick to the shadows rather than live in the glow of the lights. It's no less dangerous than the city, but the danger is shifted. The danger is subtle. Danger in the outskirts is a knife in your back, while in the city it's a punch to the face or a blaster in the chest. The city is addicting, fast-paced, and unforgiving, but there's a charm to the slums. He feels like he can breathe here. That he can slow down and admire the world. The beat of his heart and the crispness of rain in the night. This far out, he can nearly taste the salt of the bay. It's darker here. Fewer advertisements. Fewer billboards and signs. Those that remain standing flicker, the constant buzz interrupted with the crackle and pop of faulty wiring. The shadows are longer and thicker. The air isn't as saturated with noise. With the hum of electricity. The rumble of generators. The growl of engines. The din of advertisement chatter. The tide of conversation. Here in the northern outskirts, the pollution is thinner. They're farther from the plants and factories to the southwest of the city. The haze isn't as thick in the air. The lights aren't as bright. So when he tips back his head and stares up at the night sky, he can see the pinpoint lights of the stars. It's a rare cloudless night. It's the only reason they're out this far. His bag is slung over his shoulder, strapped tight to his chest. The weight of his hollow ball is familiar and comforting where the bag hangs on his back. It's an old thing. Heavy and larger than modern ones. A ball with one flat side. A button on top. Pressing it sends up a hologram of the night sky around them, illuminating and labeling old-world constellations. Memories of his father showing him how to use it, how to find the stars, telling him stories that go along with the shapes in the night sky, on the rare cloudless nights. They bleed into his desire to share the same moments with Lance, to show him, to teach him, to see his favorite constellations reflected in Lance's eyes. So you lived out here, huh? He lowers his gaze. Finding where Lance walks along a fault line risen out of the old concrete street. His balance is impressive. He barely wavers as his boots take step after step, arms held out as he walks along the risen edge of crumbling asphalt. Yeah, he says, breath fogging up in the night air. Something that's not visible when they're in the thick of the city. Grew up out here with my dad. Before he died and I had to move into the city to survive. And that's where Shiro found you. It's not a question, even though it's said as one. Lance knows his story. His history. Knows it all in fragmented pieces that he occasionally snaps together. When he brought you to the garrison. I stole his car. Keith's lips curve at the memory. Something soft and precious, preserved as a dying ember of a time when things felt right. It was garrison tech, too. He wasn't mad, though. He was impressed. Took me in to help me straighten up my act. Clearly didn't work. Because he's back here now. Back on the lower streets. No longer homeless or starving. He's powerful. Part of an influential gang. Has the money. Has the strength to back up his bite. It's different, but in a way, it's all the same. This is where he would have been without Shiro taking him in. It's where he ended up anyway. Life keeps on kicking. Except now he has Lance. Lance, who he thought he'd leave in the high city. Lance, who was always aiming to be the next Garrison poster boy. Lance, who would have made an amazing role model. Lance, who could have done good where he was. Lance, who followed him down to the slums. Who carved out a life in the lower city and owns it with all his might. Lance, who never lost that cocky flavor of confidence that Keith finds so addicting. Lance, who lives in his world now, and somehow still manages to shine like the gem he is. It's all the same, but it's different now. He's different. Lance is different. Their cores are the same, but their shells, hardened and chipped, are reformed. An echo of who they were. Shiny and new. He doesn't know if it's all been for the best, but there's nothing he can do to change it now. What matters is they're still kicking. They're fighting for what they believe. They're doing good, he thinks. They're finding a spark of warmth and carving out their own happiness in a world determined to take that from them. The late night air is cold and crisp. The lingering warmth of the day lost completely. The flow from the moon is a soft silver that illuminates the sharp angles of Lance's features. It catches and stretches the shadows of his nose, his jaw, his cheeks. It illuminates his clothes, long coat trailing behind him and armor plating on his chest. His elbows. His knees. A gun glints at his hip, but Keith knows it's not the only one. They left their bikes a while back, safely stashed in a Blade hideout. Keith had insisted, said it was more peaceful this way. Lance hadn't argued. The flickering lights temporarily cast Lance's dark skin in colors. Red. Blue. Purple. Yellow. Orange. Each one illuminates a different feature. A different side of him. Passion. Soft curves. Laughter lines. Fury. Strength. He's beautiful. Radiating confidence and danger. It reminds Keith of the Lance he used to know. The one he first met. When they were both young, naive, and reckless. He's filled out now. Come into his own. Has the ability to back up the attitude. Has a confidence rooted in certainty rather than the shaky foundation of a bluff. Has the width in his shoulders and the strength in his arms. A sturdiness in his thighs and a lift in his sharp chin. His wicked grin is the same as it once was. Still sends shivers down Keith's spine and ignites something hot and heavy in his gut. But it's sharper now. Dangerous. Assured. I'm glad he found you. The delivery is offhanded, but the sentiment is not. Keith's gaze trails back to the stars. Me, too. You know, where I grew up, we always thought the outskirts was a dead place. Quiet and boring and full of suspicious people more willing to stab you in the back than offer you a meal when you couldn't afford it yourself. Keith snorts, smile coiling into something cynical. It is. Not, man. I've been out here before. Paladin business and all that. This place. He spreads his arms out wide, turning in a slow circle. He never once loses his balance along the fault line. This place is alive. Keith lifts an eyebrow, pointedly looking around. Not a soul in sight. He's not foolish enough to believe they're alone, but there's no one in the open. No one to be seen. Seems pretty dead to me. Oh, yeah. Lance's grin is wicked and sharp, his eyes dancing playfully in the flickering lights. Watch this. Then he throws back his head and howls. A loud sound. Coming from deep within him. Bellowing from his chest and past his lips. Primitive. Carefree and wild. Quintessentially human. Bubbling and enthusiastic and a cry into the night. It echoes around them, filling the silence and disappearing into the night. He watches, but Lances doesn't look at him. He simply gazes around them. Waiting, waiting, waiting. And then the answering call, echoing from far away, wild and loud. The another, closer, but out of sight. And another, another, another. Wordless cries. Howls into the night. Whoops of delight and wordless cheers. People separated, but coming together. Connected while apart. In the face of Lance's smug grin, eyes sparkling with joy, Keith throws his head back and laughs. The night is alive, and it feels right. Lance holds out his hand, and Keith takes it. They walk along the fault line together. Hand in hand. Balance precarious and wavering as they laugh together. He's not sure to which side they'll fall.
They see the fight start long before it breaks out, perched up on one of the higher floors of Ultron, leaning on the railing of the exclusive balcony to gaze at the club below, lost in the pounding bass and the fleeting melody, feeling it pulse through them, feeling it echo in their bones. His chest feels full with it, his body sways, helpless to the beat. His lungs are filled with the smoke in the haze, eyes dazzled with the flashing lights in the club, flickering with the driving beat. His head feels light, light with drink, light with smoke, light with the dizzying, brimming affection for the man next to him. Lance provides a high of his own, a sweetness that curbs the bitterness that constantly lingers on its tongue. His drug, his candy. Lance spies it first, for as long as he seems in the music, swaying and humming under his breath, pressed against Keith's side with an arm draped over his shoulders, a joint hanging limply between his fingers. Despite it all, his eyes are sharp, his eyes unyielding. He's relaxed here, in Paladin territory, in Voltron. But his caution never wavers, and he's as observant as ever. He nudges Keith, nodding down to the floor when he catches his attention. Keith follows his gesture, spying the action brewing. Even from their high perch, he can see the tension, see the way the two groups regard each other, the way they shoved, the way they stand, the way they posture. Even from this distance, Keith can see that they're young, no markings or symbols to designate a gang. Not that any gang worth their salt would show themselves in the headquarters of the Paladins, not without an alliance, like the Blades. Young kids, street kids, no doubt trying to build some rep, trying to earn some respect. Two groups, friends or allies, he doesn't know. Some loosely bound code of honor that keeps them tied tight when they have nothing else to cling to. Who knows where the fight began? An insult, a brewing rivalry, territory. A job gone south, a bad move. They watch as things escalate, as the dancers are pushed to the side, as words are lost to the music, but voices can be heard over the pounding beat, shoving, posturing. No weapons drawn, they're not that stupid. They're escorted out by a lower security team before the first punch is thrown. Lance drops his arm from around his shoulder, taking his hand instead of, and pulling away from the railing. Come on, let's go watch the show. They move through the lounge area, away from the roar of the music and the flash of the lights. The beat, however, remains, a constant and thrumming drive, the pulse of the club. Lance lightly pats the heel of his hand on Hunk's head as they pass where he sprawled out on the couch, careful to keep his joint away from the man's hair. We got a punk fight outside. Hunk blinks up at them, eyes glassy and focus hazy. Same kids again? There's a girl on the couch next to him. A big girl, built big and sculpted strong, curled into Hunk's side like she's no more than a kitten. Face flushed, eyes glassy. Focus takes a moment to reach them. A punk fight? Len spins on his heel to walk backwards. Momentum never slowing by the tension on the couches they leave behind. Two groups of local punks getting into scraps like they're hot-ish. She blinks, slow and lethargic, before looking up at Hunk. Does that happen often? He shrugs, already pushing off the couch and pulling her to her feet. They both waver, giggles escaping them. Oh yeah, gotta build up your rep quick down here. They think picking fights outside Voltron will help that. Pidge! Lance shouts, spinning back around to guide Keith through the lounge. Baby, fight! From somewhere Keith hears that echo. Baby, fight! Baby, fight! Lance pulls him out into the outside balcony, just below the usual line of hover traffic, but high above the street. They line up along the railing, leaning their arms against it as they gaze at the crowd gathering below. Punks, as Lance had called them. Too old to be kids. Too young to know better. Picking fights just because they can. To gain rep. To gain respect. Trying to carve out a hole for themselves in this Ishni city life. Carving it out with fists and clenched teeth. It's where Keith would have been if Shiro hadn't found him. It's where Lance would have been if his family hadn't starved themselves for several months to get the money to send him to Garrison. They watch the first punch thrown, and it's chaos after that. Two groups collide. Punks, street kids. No knives, no guns, just bare fists and blooded knuckles. Tooth and nail. A crowd forms around them, not so much interested in the kids, but in the spectacle. In a moment of fierce brutality. One that they don't want to participate in, but wish to experience through the eyes of others. They cheer from above. Lance hollers at them, trying to give them pointers as best he can. Hunk makes pained sounds when Signan hits land. Pidge cackles loudly, egging them on with pointed remarks. Allura takes bets, creating a pool and collecting the credits. Their balcony becomes crowded. Joints and glasses are passed around. He wraps an arm around Lance's waist, unable to help the tug at his lips when Lance leans into his side. Melts against him, uses him as an anchor. His gaze drips from the fight below to the people on the balcony. His friends. Friends. Old and new. They laugh and grin, manic and sharp, teeth glinting in the neon lights. Eyes glassy and world spinning. But they laugh. They laugh and laugh and laugh. Neither cruel nor merciless. Genuine. A joy found in good company. A joy found in loyalty. A joy that stems from the bubbling relief of peace founded in trust. Being with the Paladin is different from being with the Blades. The Blades are trustworthy and loyal, but more to the cause than individual. Hardened. Gruff. Closed off and polished from years of weathering hardships. The Paladins still have their sharp edges. Hardened, yes, but the pointed edges protect what lies beneath. A softness unafraid to come to light. A vulnerability. A companionship and camaraderie. A need for more. A desire to be more. A desire to do more. It's a strength. It fuels their fire. He's seen it in Lance's eyes. In Hunk's. In Pidge's. In Allura's. They're everything the Blades are, but more. More because they know how to laugh. And here, on this balcony, they laugh. High on the joy of life. Of being alive. The thrill that stems from the terrifying reality of survival. But they're alive. They're alive and they're finding a reason in each other to be happy. They laugh until they cry. Until tears form in their eyes and streak down their cheeks. Wiped away with tender touches and lost in smiles. Keith files the memory away for later. For when things inevitably come crashing down. For when the night is cold and he needs a reminder that good things exist. He won't forget the good times.
He never wants to leave this sunset city. Not again. When he left the first time, he thought he would have nothing to come back to. He never imagined that he'd gain more than he had before. He never let himself believe Lance could be his again. That he'd make friends as good as Hunk, Pidge, and Allura. He never thought he'd be happy like this. That he'd experience joy again. That he'd feel the honest peace of contentment. That the taste of Lance's lips and the touch of his skin would be anything more than an echo in his memory. He doesn't want to leave, but he knows the time may come. Shiro is still out there. He refuses to believe any different. Refuses to believe any other reality. Shiro is out there, and Shiro needs him. He never gave up on Keith, and Keith isn't giving up on him. He can't. He won't. He doesn't want to leave, but the time will come. He doesn't know what will happen then. If what he's built here will be strong enough to withstand, or if it'll shatter all over again. He doesn't know if the home he's building will still be standing, or if it'll burn to the ground. He doesn't know if Lance will wait for him a second time. He doesn't want to leave, but at some point, he'll have to. He'll hate the goodbyes. They'll rip his heart out and leave a pulsing hole in his chest. But he'll do it because he has to. For Shiro. For himself. He doesn't want to leave, and he doesn't have to yet. Not yet. Not just yet. For now, he'll enjoy things as they are. He'll continue his research. Continue helping the Blades. Continue his search and follow leads. He'll continue to seek out the joy between moments. He'll stay with Lance, building what he hopes will be a fortress that can withstand his absence. He'll hate the goodbye, but he won't forget the good times. He'll never forget the good times.
Pain blossoms across his cheek, snapping his head to the side. He stumbles back, grin stretching his split lip as he licks across the cut, the taste of metal and salt on his tongue, adrenaline singing in his veins, the heat of the fight burning in his blood. He looks back at his opponent, straightening slowly, crack his neck as he makes eye contact, gaze fierce and sharp, grin manic as he lifts a hand into the air, middle finger up. The Galra lunges, and Keith sweeps away, swinging his other fist. The satisfying crack of impact, the crunch of cartilage, the spray of warmth across bare knuckles. He stumbles away, but Keith is charging after him. The crack of a chain behind him, buzzing and crackling with energy. The sickening snap of it against broken concrete. Keith's hand flies to his dagger, pulling it from his sheath and pressing his thumb to the gem. The energy crackles to life, creating a much longer and much more wicked blade. He spins, raising it to stop the chain as it swings. It wraps around his blade, energy crackling, plasma sparking against each other. He grits his teeth, holding tight. Eyes locked on the Gora, sneering a few feet away, scarred face lit by the crackling flare of their weapons. A shot of light. His eyes go wide, mouth falling open. A trickle of blood from the corner of his lips. He falls. The chain goes limp. Keith lets it fall from his sword, straightening to look to the side. Lance stands there, eyes shining above the face mask that covers the lower half of his face. He can tell from the lift of his cheeks that he's grinning. Hair mussed and wild. Long coat whipping behind him. Gun still raised. A moment of eye contact. A moment of exchanged smiles, a moment where wild and chaotic energy crackles between them, a spark that catches, a flare that burns, a wildfire that consumes. Lance's eyes snap to something behind him. He hears movement, and then he spins, dashing once more into the fray. He loses himself in it, in the pain, in the fire, in the adrenaline. His movements are reactionary. A habit, an impulse built from experience and training. He cuts through the Galra blindly, one enemy to another. Protect his fellow Galra. Protect the paladins at his side. One Galra down, find another. The ambush they had set up had gone off smoothly. Galra running quint loads through newly cut blade territory, hedging on the border of the paladins' turf. New supply routes they devised. Routes that Pidge had managed to find while hacking their system a week back. They set up an ambush for them. Blades and paladins scatter. Their intervention seems to have been expected, however. There's a lot more Galra than an average supply run would warrant, or maybe they're just taking precautions. Their alliance has been giving them a lot of pushback lately. His post and Lance were nowhere near each other. but he's not surprised when they end up together. Lance moves from perch to perch, watching Keith's back. The two of them drawn together by a gravitational force, a tug that connects them through space and time, something they can't resist or ignore. He feels the crackle between them, catches glimpses of sharp blue eyes, the manic sparks in them. It reminds him of picking fights in the garrison. Reminds him of fights and scuffles with Lance at his back. Reminds him of the laughter they shared afterward, cataloging their bruises and cuts. Reminds him of being younger, more innocent, naive, when fighting was easy and lacked the thrill of actual consequence, when danger was a thin illusion that made them feel a semblance of freedom. Here's it different. The air is colder. The sting and ache is sharper. The adrenaline is more addicting, and the satisfaction is real. It's dangerous. It's life-threatening. And with Lance at his back and a blade in his hand, he feels alive. Sirens cut through the night, slicing through the fight-induced haze. Everyone freezes. Galra, blades, and paladins. They stop. A moment of stillness as sirens echo around them, as the familiar flashing lights bounce off the buildings in the distance, distinct from the usual neon glow. A snapshot in the moment of action, a slice of stillness in the middle of a fight. People frozen in time, tension filling the air, thick and suffocating, pulling the string between them all taut. Pulling, pulling, pulling. Run! It snaps. Everyone scatters. Gangs and alliances forgotten. Everyone for themselves. It's part of their lifestyle. Breaking apart holds a better chance for everyone. He doesn't think the Galra care for each other. The Blades know everyone can handle themselves. In the moments of chaos, however, he sees the Paladins grouping. Hunk grabs Pidge, throwing her over his shoulder as he runs as she shouts behind him. Allure grabs Pidge's brother, Matt, spinning him around and dragging him off. A hand slips into his own, and suddenly Lance is there, dragging him through the scattering chaos, leaping over bodies, weaving through people, hands tight to stay together, darting around buildings and through alleyways. In an escape, there are no enemies, no more fights, no more paladins and blades versus the Galra, no last-minute punches thrown. While the garrison may be in the pocket of the Galra, the Empire doesn't give a about lowly grunts. They rather let them rot in garrison prisons as punishment for being caught. They're all allies in the face of the garrison. They run, sprinting through the streets, lungs aching and legs screaming, through the city, into the crowds, beneath the neon lights, splashing through the puddles, shoving past tweakers lingering on the corners and dealers trying to catch their eye. The sound of sirens fades behind them. The flashing lights of orange and whites no longer bounce off the buildings around them. They slow their pace, hands still clutched tight, adrenaline bleeding to relief. Relief, bleeding to giddy height of its own. Laughter bubbles up from their chests, spilling past their lips and into the night. Lance drags him into an alleyway, devoid of neon signs, pulls him into the shadows, where the light is only an echo against their skin. Mask pulled down. Keith gets a glimpse of his wild grin before he pressed to the concrete wall, cold, chipped, and rough against his back. Lance's body firm and solid and warm against his front, their armor hard and digging where it presses together, a knee pressed between his thighs, rubbing up into him, making him gasp, making his hips rock, a firm hand on his thigh, long slender fingers pulling it up around Lance's hip. Lance's mouth, hot heavy on his, lips firm and demanding, parted to let the wet heat of his tongue push into Keith's mouth, heads tilted to find the right angles. Keith's arms around Lance's broad shoulders, fingers digging into his hair. Needy sounds rip from his throat as Lance's hips rock into him, again and again, pinning him to the wall. The taste of salt and metal, sharp pain from split lips, bruises burning on their flesh, silently screaming as hands and fingers dig into them. His body aches, his body sings, chest heaving, breath coming short, hot in his mouth. Lance pushes into him, demanding, commanding, desperate and passionate. Keith clings to him, giving what he can, taking what Lance gives, lost in his touch, lost in his taste, lost in his lips and the devilish swipe of his tongue, lost in him. he won't forget the good times.
High on a rooftop overlooking the city around them. Stretching high enough to cross the line between the lower and upper city. The party thrives. Dozens of people dressed in their best. An armor of its own. Fashions only a few seasons out of date. Colors. Walking the line of standing out and blending in. The music is more of a low hum than the clubs. Conversation prevails. The dance is in their words. In the social maneuvering. In the deals made beneath the din. Glasses clink to celebrate. Laughter rings out like bells, fake and crystalline. It's a front. A charade. A game. The paladins are branching out with their clientele. Trying to get backers from a few steps up from their usual. The Empire's product is failing. The paladins have something new. Something fun. Something clean and pure. A better high. Less of a crash. New formulas. New flavors. Take a quick hit. Something small to whet your appetite. Feels good, doesn't it? Wanna set up a plan for more? A lure flits between them all. A diamond. A shining beacon of social grace. The coy smile that draws them in. A shrewd eye for business. Hunk makes casual conversation. Serving drinks. Slipping out little samples when they come to him with a special slip given out by Allura. A friendly face and a warm smile, but the bulk and the size to intimidate. To dissuade any trouble. Pidge and her brother talk shop. Details. Keep the secrets of the trade out of the convo, but keep them interested. Science babble. How they cut the new quint. How they made it. What makes it special. What makes it clean. Describe the high. Pique the interest. Corin slips through the crowd. An eccentric face. An exuberant voice. Keeps people interested, mildly amused. Makes them relax. Makes them laugh. That makes them more willing to try. More willing to spend money. Under other circumstances, Keith knows full well that Lance would be out there with them. Charming and saddling up with the money. Putting on his charm and turning his smile up to 11. He'd be good at it. He probably is. He's not in the crowd, however. He's with Keith. They stand off to the side. At the back of the crowd. Leaning up against the half wall that surrounds the edge of the roof. Not quite sitting. Not quite standing. Out of the way of others. In a world of their own. They're dressed in black. Makes them stand out from the crowd. Shows that they're not the money. They're the guns. Not to be trifled with. Ready to fish up, should it be needed. Pressed close. Thighs and hips touching. Lance's arm slung casually around his waist. They lean close. Cigarettes between their fingers. Smoke rising like twisted fingers into the night. Can't get high. Not while on a job. Not while keeping an eye on everything. But the nicotine is fresh and grounding. Heads bowed together. Skin a breath away from touching. A tease of warmth. They watch the crowd. Whisper together. Chuckle softly. Lance's breath on his lips. Ghosting against his skin. Lips moving against the shell of his ear. Smile pulled small and private, pressed to the sensitive flesh of his neck as he tilts his head. Fingers digging into Lance's thigh. Reminds him of other parties. When they were young. Dressed casually in black and pressed into the back of the room. Creating a private space for just them. A bubble of suspended time as the party shifted around them. When they were still new to the world. When they didn't know better. When they chased each other without really knowing why. Drawn to each other by a powerful force. A fierce passion neither of them could deny. Chasing each other. An endless game. Before they truly knew what love is. What it means. With the smell of Lance's breath, sweet and bitter with smoke, filling his senses, and his lips hot on his skin, Keith thinks he knows now. He thinks he knows what it means. The bonfire moon comes down in the sky behind them. The party continues on. Keith memorizes the feeling of Lance pressed into his side. Of his touch and his heat. The comfort of his presence. The aching of his chest when faced with that smug grin. The dizziness he feels when they steal light and fleeting kisses. He won't forget the good times.
Sweat on skin, glistening in the neon lights that filtered through the window. Salt on his tongue as he leans down to taste, as he leaves bruises on tanned flesh with lips and teeth, as he pants against Lee's skin. Pressed together, bodies moving, 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 unable to stop, chasing the flesh that builds between them. Lance is hot and tight around him. Keith drives into him, over and over. Hits unrelenting as he pushes Lance into the mattress, as the bed creaks and slams against the wall. Lance's legs wrap tight around him, thighs powerful and bruised from his fingertips. Lance's nails clawing down his back, tearing into flesh, leaving raised lines to mark his pleasure. Head tossed back, eyes squeezed shut. Red, swollen lips part, chestnut hair slick with sweat and messy against the pillow. Back arched beautifully, chest heaving, abs flexing at his hips, rolled to meet Keith's thrusts. Driving, driving, building, building, chasing each other, chasing the pleasure, chasing the build, chasing the drive. Lost together, lost in time, lost in a neon glow. Lance cries out, body tensing. Keith is right behind him. Sounds ripped from his throat and he spills inside him. Tension. The break. He collapses on top of him. Lies there as they revel in the high. Floating and light. Easing down slowly. Far more naturally than any hit. Keith rests his head on Lance's chest, listening to the fluttering of his heartbeat slowly calm down. Lance's fingers in his hair, on his shoulders and back, tracing up and down his spine. Soothing, rhythmic. Keith hums, feels Lance's lips press into his hair. He knows he's crushing Lance into the mattress, but he doesn't complain. He closes his eyes, feels at ease, body light and mind drifting, calm, settled, floating in nothing, anchored by the man beneath him. It's a peace he hasn't felt in a long, long time. One that he's only ever been able to find in Lance's embrace. He's been searching for so long. For what? He's never been sure. Something. Anything. To make him feel alive. To make him feel safe. To make him feel like he's found his place. He never realized what he had till he left it behind. Now he has it again. Now he knows. When they laughed. When they cried. These are the days. They own the night. Here, in Lance's apartment, in his embrace, they're locked away, lost in time. And it's here, in the smoke-filled room, smelling of salt and sweat, reveling in the high of their pleasure, of each other, that Keith finds the nerve to say, "I don't want to leave." It's mumbled against Lance's collarbone, whispered against warm skin. The fingers in his hair still, tightening their grip, fingers on his spine carefully, tracing the notches. "Then don't," he whispers into the room, into the dead space between them, soft and assured, firm in conviction, but wavering in a gentle fear. Keith's arms tightening around him, turning to bury his face in the crook of the neck. "I might have to. The time may come. Will you come back?" He's hesitant. Keith's not. "Yes." "Then I'll take you at your word and carry on. But I'll wait for you." Lance shifts, forces Keith to look up, cups his face and pulls him into a kiss. Soft but no less fierce. A gentle passion. A firm conviction. A promise. A demand. Lips melding into one. Keith eases into it. Claims him. Takes in all of him. And gives himself in return. Locked away in each other's embrace. Lost in time. He'll hate the goodbye, but he won't forget the good times.
The sound he wakes up to is sharp and quick. A succession and pattern that he's become innately familiar with. His eyes snap open. Startled from the dead of sleep with a spike of adrenaline. Only for it to quickly waver in the fresh light of day. He groans, closing his eyes once more as he buries his face in the warmth of Lance's back. Rubbing his nose along the notches of his spine. Wrapping his arms tight around his narrow waist. tucking his legs into the crook of his knees. He breathes out a sigh. Content once more. But the beeping sounds again. Sharp and quick. 3. 4. 2. He sighs again, this time tired, as he rolls over. He stares at the ceiling for a moment. At the cracking plaster. At the water damage stains that are near invisible at night. His head rolls to the side, eyeing the communicator sitting atop his gloves on the nightstand. The harsh red light of day streams in through the window. It drowns out the still flickering neon billboards outside Lance's apartment. Makes the light muted and sickly. It lights up the room in a reddish-gray glow. Brings a gritty realism to the apartment. To the cracks in the walls and the stains on the floor. To the sickly pallor of Lance's bruises against his skin. Of the scars that mar his flesh. The world outside is gray and dreary. A cloudy day, despite the sun. Threatening rain, no doubt. Dirty buildings. A grimy street below. Cars zipping by stained with the ash of pollution. The smell of stale smoke and bitter sweat lingers in the room, sharp on his tongue. He sits up slowly, gritting his teeth as his body protests. Bruises. Cuts. Scars. Muscles aching, echoes of both pain and pleasure. His feet hit the floor. Cold. Skin less porcelain and more tarnished ivory in the light of day. He leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Running his fingers through messy hair. Trying to wake up enough. Trying to work up the will to answer. It better not be urgent. He just wants to crawl back into bed behind Lance. He places the familiar metal square to the back of his hand. Barely wincing as the needles dig into his skin. He's used to the bite. Desensitized to it. It fades quickly into a distant throb. Shaking it away, he lifts his hand, palm up. It glows. He waits. A soft ping. Keith Coggin, he says, trying to make his voice clear and concise despite the grogginess he feels. Another soft ding. A brighter glow. A holographic orb floating over his palm, wavering lines ticking in time to the voice that comes through. New leads have been found. Code Silver. We may have found him. Report back to base as soon as you are able. The message cuts out. The glow fades. The room goes silent. Keith can hear nothing but the ringing in his ears and the pound of his heart. Shiro. He turns, eyes settling on the man in the bed behind him. Curled into the blankets. Face lax in sleep. Lips parted and hair mussed. Skin marked with fresh bruises from Keith's lips and teeth. He's going to have to leave. He doesn't know how things will be when he returns. He reaches out, fingers shaking as he runs them along Lance's back. Over warm skin. Digging through his hair. Tracing along the curve of his neck. His jaw. His cheek. His lips. He commits it to memory. This moment. Lance, so peaceful next to him. Marked and tired and relaxed. At peace with Keith. Beautiful, even in the harsh light of day. He memorizes how he looks. How he feels. The warmth beneath his fingertips and the softness of his skin. The smell of stale smoke and the lingering salt of their skin. No matter what happens, he won't forget the good times.